Tov. Okay, so we're going to start with the first Rashi, which is my favorite Rashi in all of the Torah. So the pasuk says, "Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva v'yelech Harana." So Rashi says, "Vayetze lo haya tzarich lichtoi v'elo v'yelech Yaakov." Right. So generally, when we're describing someone going somewhere, we say that he went somewhere. We talk about the destination he's going to. We don't necessarily speak about the departure. There's no necessity to speak about the departure because by virtue of the fact that he's going somewhere, it's implied that he's left the place. So Rashi says, Ulama hiskir yitziyaso. So what's the purpose? Why did the Torah use these extra words to tell us that Yaakov left? Ella magid sheyitziyaso tzadik min hamakom user Reshem. So when a tzaddik departs a place, he creates a residue, a trace, an echo, a memory, however you want to describe Reshem. Reshem can be defined in numerous ways. It can mean leftovers, it could mean something that reminds us of what was originally there. So when a tzaddik leaves, he creates a Reshem. Shabizman shat tzaddik be'ir, because when the tzaddik's in the town itself, hu hodo, hu zivo, hu hadra. So he himself is what makes the town important. He himself is what beautifies the town. He himself is the significance of the town. Because we say, a tzaddik is here right now, so the town itself loses its significance. And the point of signification is the fact that the tzaddik is there. Yatsa misham, but when the tzaddik leaves, pana hodo, pana zivo, pana hadra. So those all leave, and the town reverts back to the way it was beforehand without the tzaddik. And we also find the same concept by Rus. So it applies to women as well. It applies to people who are not the Avos. It's not simply by the Avos that we say that their departure leaves a residue, leaves a trace, leaves an echo, leaves a vacuum of sorts that reminds us of what was originally here. Rather, this applies by all holiness. Whenever holiness leaves a place, when the tzaddik itself, which represents righteousness, kedusha, hashra'ah, the presence of something holy, so his leaving is felt. It can mean also that the people are murmuring, the people are mumbling about, oh, that tzaddik was here and now he's left. That could be the Reshem itself. That could be the point that the tzaddik has left. So the whole shir is going to be an attempt, not a success at describing what this Reshem is. What exactly is being left by a tzaddik? What's being left in the town? Is it the fact that we now have parts of the tzaddik, a memory of the tzaddik, and we remember him and we mourn the fact that he's not there? Or is it something deeper and something more significant in the sense of what exactly a tzaddik is doing in this town and what a Reshem is? So the first makor is Sfas Emes, and he says, Beferish, he's generally the first interpretation of a Reshem, the way we generally assume a trace, the way we think about a residue of something is that there was something here, an object was here, it was present in this original place, and now that it's left, so now all we have is a memory. The thing is gone, and now all we could do is remember what was here, or possibly he's left tracks, and now we could assume and conjure up in our mind and think from the pratim back to the klal of what was here originally. That's how we would generally define the Reshem. That if a person had ink in his pocket, for example, and he got up from a chair, so there's a slight residue of the ink on the chair itself, and we would say that he left a Reshem of ink on his chair. But the Sfas Emes has a different interpretation, which is what the shir is going to be based on. The Sfas Emes says that the Reshem is not that. He says, V'kasha, ha'kol ha'kushya haya me'achar she'en shabach v'to'eles bi'yitzia rak ha'hiluch lama nichtaf ha'yitzia. So the kasha of Rashi is, if the only shevach of the tzaddik right now is the fact that he's going somewhere, and the Torah is trying to tell us where he's going, so what's the purpose of telling us yitzia? That was the kasha of Rashi. What positive aspect can we learn out from the fact that the tzaddik left? He left the place. V'im kain mugdal hakushya b'teretz. So the answer itself strengthens the question. Ki chisaron hayitzia ein tzarich lichtov. So Rashi was bothered by the fact that, why are you telling me that tzaddik left if all that does is tell us something bad about the place he left? So the answer Rashi gives is because he left a Reshem, he left a vacancy, he left a vacuum of emptiness. So that just makes it worse. Now that place is suffering even more. It's not only something that happened Mamela by virtue of the tzaddik leaving, but it actually did a maisa that he left a vacuum, he left an emptiness, he left a hole, he left a fissure in the town where he was previously. So the Sfas Emes says that can't be the proper understanding because that strengthens the question. V'yesh lefarish me'ein lahepach ki kol zman shatzadik bir hu hoda aziva. So Sfas Emes says we should explain it differently than the normal understanding of this. It says because when the tzaddik is in the town, that's the holiness of the town. Perish she'ein hashevach nikra al shem hamakom me'achar shatzadik oidenu shama. So the Sfas Emes says something cool. He says that the town itself had a significance. The town itself, every place has a shevach, every place has a ratzon miyuchad. So that is shining when nothing is there to cover it up. But when something greater comes, the tzaddik comes, now his shevach overtakes and swallows up the shevach of the makom. At least that's my reading of it. Okay? Aval b'tziyatzom me'amakom, but when the tzaddik leaves, nishar reshima b'hamakom. So now the original significance and importance of that specific place returns to its original place. Meaning the importance of the tzaddik was blocking that from expressing itself. Now that the tzaddik has left, so now the town could be Masudar again. Now that specific kavod shamayim, that's ola from that specific town, can come back to its place. So the fact that the tzaddik leaves the Roshem is not a shevach to the tzaddik, but it's a shevach to the makom, that now the makom itself can revert back to its original significance. We also find this by the creation of the world. Right? We know from the Arizal that before the Tzimtzum, before the creation of the world, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed or was Masalek, or he implied that he had to limit his light, the world was nothing. There was no concept of the world because all it was the Or Ein Sof, and it was impossible for anything else to come in the place. V'achar habriya, but after creation, Zekiyum ha'olam ma shehiniach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Reshima hamitkayemes hakol kinod liyodim. So what exactly then, the Sfas Emes says, what creates the world? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Masalek, he vacated his light, so what gives the world kiyum? Obviously nothing exists in a vacuum, it can't exist without the spiritual kiyum of it. So what's existing there? It's the Reshima of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. It's the residue, the echo, the trace of that Or Ein Sof that was there previously. That's what's left when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mitzamsim himself and Masalek himself. Okay, V'chein nohagin yinzeh b'chol ha'masim. Every maisa we do leaves the Roshem. Shakol Ever Shanaseh Bo Mitzvah V'Avoda B'Kedusha, because any limb that does a mitzvah or any holy act, Nishar by Reshima Kedusha V'Hitikan Ha'olam. Anything, any holiness, any positive action leaves a residue, leaves a Roshem. So that's the Sfas Emes. So, although it's a little bit ambiguous what exactly the Sfas Emes is trying to say, I think that what he's saying is that it's not the fact that the tzaddik left and now there's a vacancy of the tzaddik and people are murmuring and trying to remember what the tzaddik left and that's the Roshem of the tzaddik. But rather, every time that something is present, the tzaddik is present, there's always a subterranean Roshem. There's always a trace of holiness that's rumbling underneath the tzaddik, that's rumbling underneath that which is present, awaiting to express itself, but it's unable to express itself because there's another Roshem there. There's the tzaddik there and he's blocking it. But the tzaddik always feels that rumbling. The tzaddik always feels that otherness, that other trace, that other Roshem of the makom itself, because everything was nivra l'chavod Hashem. So when the tzaddik leaves, that's able to express itself, and the makom itself now becomes holy. And so too with the Bria of the Olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Or Ein Sof was there beforehand. But underneath that Or Ein Sof, there was a ratzon to be Bora the Olam. The Arizal speaks about the ratzon that was Misorer Mineu Bey. There was no hisorus from the Tachtonim for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the world. All the Svarim say that. So then why did Hashem decide to create the world? If there were no Maisim Tovim, Adam Arishon wasn't there yet to create, to be Mala enthusiasm, to be Mala hisorus, to be Mala Mayin Nukvin for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the world. So what was it that made Hashem decide to create the world? What was it? It was a Mineu Bey, the Arizal says. That Mineu Bey was an internal experience, Kaviyachal obviously, of a Hisorus. And what the Sfas Emes is trying to say is that was the Roshem, that was the trace, that was the echo, and that was the screaming of the world that would eventually come. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu was there and there was no world, there was an echo of the world that would eventually come. That's what the Sfas Emes is saying. The Roshem is not that which is left in the vacancy of something, but the Roshem is the trace of another thing. And bear with me because this is a topic I love, but it's hard for me to express it. the trace of another thing is always rumbling. There's always the opposite in potential. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu was there alone, there was the potential of Nivraim. What the Mukubalim call, and we'll see in the Leshem later on, there's a Koach HaGvul Bebilti Gvul. There's a strength of limitation, ability of limitation within the infinite. That's the aspect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which would eventually come to create the world. So too in everything we do. Whenever we do something, there's always something else that's rumbling underneath. There's always another thing that we're not doing at that moment. Because everything, Maharal says it based on the first philosophers of Judaism, based on Aristotle even, that Yedias Hafachim Huachad, the knowledge of opposites is one. And that by virtue of something expressing itself, we can understand, we can point to it and say, this thing that's in existence right now, that's expressing itself, there's the opposite of it rumbling underneath it. It's trying to express itself, but it can't because that thing is right there right now. So the Sfas Emes is saying that when the tzaddik leaves, so then the Rosham of the Malkum could be Megala itself. Okay? So, based on what the Sfas Emes ends with, where he says that the Reshimu, this is the Leshem and the Mekubalim, the Reshimu was left after HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mitzamtim himself. The residue of God, of Or Ein Sof was left. So let's look at the Ramchal in Klach Pesach Chachma and Pesach Chaf Vav. So he says, Zeh ha'or shenetzal hi nikar Reshimu. The first Or that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in order to create the world after the Tzimtzum, after Hashem removed his Or Ein Sof and enabled there to be a place of separateness or otherness or difference. So that's what we call the Reshimu, the residue, min ha'or ha'kodem. It's what's left over from that original Or. Just like shemen, right? When we have an oil, there's always the residue of oil. So just like the Or. When the Or left, there was a residue of Or. Shalarov gadlusa lo haya musag. But we couldn't understand the Or Ein Sof because Nivraim can't exist when the Or Ein Sof is there. V'sod zeh ha'reshimu hu nikra makom kol hanimsa. This Reshimu is what's Makayim, all of existence. That's the place of existence. Because Hashem removed his Or Ein Sof, Kaviyachol, and therefore the world had to come into existence. But the world can't exist without a residue of the Or. And this Reshimu, this leftoverness, is what's enabling the world to be Mukuyim. Mash lo hayanosen habilti tachlis. Mash ein kain, when there was unlimited Or of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before the Tzimtzum, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't create the world because there was no room for the world. Zeh ha'makom nikra shehu chalal. So this place, this Reshimu, this trace, this residue, where there is a remembrance, an echo, a trace, a rumbling, a murmuring of that original thing, this is also called emptiness. This is the chalal hapanoi that we always discuss. And the world is empty, kavyachol. Even though we know Tzimtzum was lav kipshuta, we see it as emptiness. This Reshimu is not seen, but this residue of the Or Ein Sof is what gives kiyum to all of existence. Who panoi me Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, and it's empty from the original infinite light. The original infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not there anymore, and it's empty, but, says the Ramchal, even though it seems to be a contradiction, there's a residue of Or Ein Sof. There's a trace of it, which means that this Ratzon to create the world, that came from within HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, from the Minei Ubei, that Hesorus Minei Ubei, that Ratzav V'Shov that we feel, the Pnimius, Mibasri Yachza Elokim, right? That movement, that internal movement that we feel before there's any external expression of the movement, is Kavyachol how we could understand this Minei Ubei, Klape Mala, of what it means that there was a Hesorus that came from within the person himself. Because generally we understand Hesorus or enthusiasm or inspiration to come from without the person. But over here we're speaking about something very internal, and Chabad Svarim talk about this more than anybody else in a very serious way. They say so many words, and they recognize it's impossible to explain it in an experiential fashion. It's what the Rebbe Rashab always says, it's what creates the fact that we shuckle. It's not shuckling itself, but it's that feeling, Kavyachol, of an inner movement, of an inner back and forth, of Milim again don't cover this, but it's the Shashuam Ha'atzmim, the Rebbe Rashab calls it, the back and forth movement that takes place because of absolute inner joy of Simcha Be'etzem, essential Simcha, not connected to anything external. So that's what took place to create this world, but what served as its inspiration was the trace, was the eventual echo of Bria. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew, Hayoviyah was Biyachad. Hashem knew that eventually the world would come into Bria, and the echo, the tza'aka, the trace of that Bria is what created this Tzimtzum, and when the Tzimtzum was removed, so that was left. That's the Reshimu. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, we'll use the sources to try and explain this. So Leshem in Sefer HaKlalim, in Shar Yud, Parak Aleph, he says, we'll start from the fourth word in, he says, V'tzorcho v'inyano. So what's the purpose of this Reshimu? What's the purpose of this residue? Hu kedei lahashir roshem or ein sof b'chol ha'olamos kulam. In the third Makor, the Leshem.
Who's the Leshem?
Leshem Shabbat Chaloma was Rav Shlomo Elyashiv. He was Rabbi Yashav Zatzal's grandfather. He was considered Peshlishi to the Vilna Gaon in terms of Kabbalah, even though he lived in the early 1900s. He was a major writer on Kabbalah Sagra, but he was also Rav Kook's Rebbe in Kabbalah. Rav Kook used to go to learn with him. He only came to Eretz Yisrael at the end of his life and lives in the old city. And Rav Aryeh Levine used to be his shamish, and he eventually became his mechutin, or grand mechutin, because Rav Elyashiv married his daughter. Rav Elyashiv was very close to his grandfather. In Shar HaKlalim, actually in this Sefer, in the Hakdama, he thanks his grandson, Rav Elyashiv. He thanks his grandson Rav Elyashiv for writing the Sefer for him, which means Rav Elyashiv wrote the Shar HaKlalim, which is the Leshem's magnum opus. He wrote when he was 14, so that's how that was Rav Elyashiv.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But the Leshem was an ish kadosh v'nora. Chavetz Chaim used to say about the Leshem that if he used to tell people to try and see him in this life, because B'olam Haba there's not going to be shaychus to seeing his mechitza. He was a tznuah, he was mamish, like not shaykh to politics or anything. He just wrote his entire life and like gave over his soul in his writings. Which is why there's a letter from Reb Eli Weintraub's Zatzal, when someone asked if he could translate the Leshem. So he said no, because by all other authors it's just words, but by the Leshem his neshama is given over his words also, and you can't translate that. So the Leshem writes, B'tzorcha v'inyano, this simsum, kedei lahashir roshem or ein sof, in order to leave a residue, to leave a trace of the infinite light, b'chol ha'olam kulam, in all the eventual worlds, v'hu la'olam im ha'metzias, and it will always be there together with all of creation, with all of existence. It's always in the background. It's always hidden in the background of reality. V'hu ikr makomo shel olam, and that's the place of the world. When we call it Kadosh Baruch Hu makomo, that's what it means. This is what gives the world kiyum and existence. V'hanosa v'sova l'skol, and it carries it and it sustains it. Amnan hu behelem neirim od. It's very, very hidden, very hidden. U'lechein eino gorem shum ikuv u'maniya l'chol pu'ulas hatzimtzum. And therefore, I mean, the logical question would be that if this is still there, you can't have a leftover of Ein Sof. The leftover of infinity would be infinite as well. So why is it that if the world is sustained by this residue, this trace, this murmuring of the Ein Sof beforehand, why is it that they're suffering? I mean, all the questions we all have. Why is it that this chabur is taking place? Why is it that anything takes place? So he says, because it's so hidden, it does not cause any distraction from the continuation of the pulas at simsum. Simsum happens, asher inyanuhu al koach ha'agvala v'ha'hester v'gvul umida, which acts upon the concepts of limitation and measurement and shiur and hester. So we see from the Ramchal and the Leshem that the Reshimu, the trace, right? This Roshem, yeah.
How does it change the reality of it? Like it's hidden, but it's still Orient Sof. Like I know it's a pageantry question because it doesn't have an answer that
Oh, is that
Yeah.
right?
Is it still Orient Sof?
Like walking down.
Even though it's just a Reshimu?
So the Svarim don't discuss it because it has to be hidden. It has to be very much hidden. It
Or
is the
it's
koach
word.
of Orient Sof. The avoda of us is to return the Reshimu back to its original darga of Orient Sof. To see the residue, to see the remembrance of something, and to bring it back to its original place. We're always working backwards. We're working from the pratim to the klalim. We grab the end of something, and we have to work our way back up to imagining the real picture. It's the moach of bina. We act by bina. Bina is mevin davar mitoch davar. We have to understand the original thing from the thing that we get. So the Reshimu is, it's from, this academic society, it's Nor Alila B'nai Adam. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the world in a way that's going to distract the minds of B'nai Adam. We can't understand it, and it's not even shaykh to try and give a hesber, because A, I don't know enough, and B, the Ramak says that in Pardes Rimunim that there's Ein Sof Sheilos Kazeh. there's an infinite amount of questions regarding the laws that the Kabbalah dictates, the laws that our Chachmei Chazal have dictated as to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. It's Ein Sof, and it takes its symptom of our own part. It's Mibatz Riach Selokim. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzayim himself to create the world, we need to be mitzayim ourselves to accept the world. So that's my unanswered to you.
I mean, it would seem you're saying, what's the point if it's at the Helm? That's your question.
No, it was more what does it mean that it's Behelim?
Right, how can you hide?
How can you hide it? Okay, I see what you're saying. Maybe it's just I'm saying maybe like from the Ishbit's point of view, like whatever it is, it's our job to reveal it.
Yeah, so that's
Well, I mean,
like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but the question is.
It's a good question. I
I
got you.
it was more answering.
I got you. Yeah.
that's why Emunah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, but
Yeah.
that's why the caveat is that Emunah is higher than Yediyah, and that's part and parcel of the tachlis of the Bria Solam is to reach the darga of Emunah. Emunah right now
Is there an idea? Well, there's an idea.
Yediyah in terms of knowledge, not in terms.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Is there Yediyah ever?
I'm asking. Yeah.
I mean, there's a
Is there Yediyah?
I think
a shadow of it. There's a mirage of it.
I'm
There's
saying
a hologram
even
of it.
Jews who have
Who know it all.
or who are respected because they know it all. Like
There, nowadays they probably think they know it all. The Leshem.
their just level of emunah is incredibly high. It's not that they have a level of idea that's incredibly high. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. In terms of Yediyah Hashem, that's I'm
For
talking
Marky,
about
they have it all.
I'm talking about Stam Yediyah of
Get
the
that out of here. What are you doing here?
question. I'm talking about Stam Yediyah. I'm talking about Stam Yediyah Sapratim. ולכן אין הגורם שם עיכוב ומניע לכל פעולה סצמסם אשר עניינו הוא על כוח הגבול וההסתר בגבול המידה. So this Reshem, this trace, the reason I use murmuring is because murmuring is a word that sits deeply with me, that it's that Torah from Rav Simcha Bunim about Cheshvan. It says that after Tishrei, there's so much speaking and so much davening and so much praying and so much attempting to storm the doors of heaven and attempting to carry it all ourselves, that come Cheshvan, which is Chash, which is silence, and there's a murmuring of the lips. There's a residue, just like you can't stop it, but you're not actively pursuing it right now. It's just a remembrance of that. And within that murmuring, within that silent speech that comes from the person without his conscious recognition, but rather it's an unconscious residue and trace of what he just did. So Rav Simcha Bunim says that that's the ikr. That's more important than anything, because that itself shows much more on the person, because we live in a world of traces. We live in a world of hints and memories, and anything we're actively participating is constantly bombarded by a subterranean stream of countless other traces and memories of everything else that wants to express itself at that point. Everything we do, whether it be in our interpersonal lives, anybody we talk to, we're always wondering or thinking about who else we're speaking to, who else we could talk to, and that affects our conversations. We're never talking to one person, we're talking to everybody we think about talking. There's no yichud, there's no panim lepanim, but that's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to be mitzvah to himself, and now the world is sustained on a trace of something. Anytime we're with a person we want to only be with, something is missing. It's that piece, that missing piece in everything. Why language doesn't hit the point, why yichud doesn't even hit the point, because everything else, there's a bombardment of this volcanic potential of everything else. Everything we do, everything we experience, everything we touch is defined by everything that it's not, by everything else that could be at this moment in time, and that we're not doing. So, Chaim. Reb Tzadok, we'll bring this down to the Darga of Avoda now. You know?
It's like not being able to get a song out of your head.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the murmuring of the lips of Tishrei.
And it affects everything.
But
you
why does you're saying that what you have is defined by what you don't have? That's what you're saying.
On a personal level, but even on a physical level, this bottle is a bottle of beer by virtue of the fact that it's not a bottle of water.
Right.
And this table is a table by virtue of the fact that it's not a couch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an infinite amount of possibilities of what this could have been, and this is only it because it's not that. words mean something because they're not other words.
Like a negative capability.
It's not, yeah. It's that. That's the Rebbe Rashab says negative theology and tfisas ha'ein, which is what the Rambam really did, is the highest level of grasping anything.
Or Ein Sof.
Very good. Yeah, that's what the Kabbalim say. Why didn't it say ein tachlis? Why didn't it say no beginning? So it's ein sof. It's why didn't it say it's? Why couldn't it say it in a positive way?
Right.
Why couldn't it say? Because we have to understand things by what they're not. That's how we act. That's how we understand.
But we want to understand things as they are, and that's the tension.
Yeah, that's a major tension because we can't. And we never will, and once a person accepts it and is makabel be'emunah, so then it becomes easier to be sober.
This is a negative way of describing?
Not negative in the sense that it's not, something is defined by what it's not.
No, sorry, negative meaning bad.
No, it's not like that.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like you get scans back and it's negative. Negative's a good thing in this case.
Yeah, negative
negative, I understand that you were understanding things by their negative, but not that it's...
No, it's not
We're
bad.
saying
It's
it's not
not
bad.
bad. No, it's just the nature of man. And anyone who's attempted to, I mean, positivists are like the nastiest people in the world. People who like think, positivists are, that theory in philosophy is positive, meaning that you could understand everything. That this is this because of the scientific DNA of it, or the laws of thermodynamics define what exactly is going to take place tomorrow, and that's positivism, and that is the bane of Jewish mysticism. It's not, it's just lahepach of what we're trying to do.
What was that Rambam that you mentioned before?
The Rambam is famous in Moreh Nevuchim and in Hilchos Deos in Yisodei Torah for negative theology, of saying of what all we could say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and what we're seeing from here is all we could say about the world and human experience as well, is what it's not. We could say HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no end, he's not in time. We can't say anything about Hashem because once we dictate any positive aspect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then we're already limiting him by saying that he doesn't have that other thing.
And then why in like Shemon Esrei, for instance, we have like Hakel Agadol Gibor Ban, or we have those...
Yeah, but the Gemara already in
aspects.
Brachos says that we can't add another word because then you're implying that we tried to say everything.
Yeah, it's Magen
Avram. It's Avram. His emunah wasn't. There is one God. It was Aver Liardin. It was negative, as in he was on the other side of everything else. It's a negative.
Everything. The world started by an act of negation, of tzimtzum, of retraction. Everything is based on that. Sur me'rav asetov. Everything starts choshech lifnei haor. Boreyom borey leila. Negation precedes any ability to grasp anything, and then even that grasping of anything is all relative. It's tali and erchen.
But it is only on our level. It is only on our level that we need to say that everything is really like on that negative level. For instance, in other words, because we don't have the ability to understand, therefore we have to say everything started from let's say Surmina, or from a negative aspect, right?
I mean, we're not talking about because we're not talking about God ba'atzmuso chas v'shalom. Even what we say in negative is not even negative theology is not even talking about God Himself chas v'shalom. That you can't even atzmuso yisbarach. You can't even. Rav Kook even says this. You can't say anything. We can't say anything. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's no Jewish thinker who has attempted to start from that. No one. We always start from the point of revelation, from the point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to create the world. Allah beratzono. The Baal Tanya says in numerous places, Ein tam l'ratzon. There's no reason for will. Once it happens, so now we could attempt to investigate. But atzmuso kavyachol, everything has to be kavyachol. By what you're mentioning, it's all kavyachol. It's as if we can't say anything. We can't say anything. That's emunah. That's why we're resting on emunah. Emunah is hashlechi havchal Hashem hu yazor. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of issues, and we throw them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
And then the Sharach of Emunah, the Baal Tanya also talks about how you can't put any label on God, even Spheros, because He's the creator of all of that. He's so much higher than that. It's just the way we relate to it.
Yeah. So now let's bring this to the Darga of Avoda. So Reb Tzadok is really the only person I've seen who discusses this, and he hits it mamish on the head. So listen to this. So it's in Likutei Ma'amarim. So we're going to start from Os Chaf Beis, which you see the line, and then we'll go to Os Chaf Gimel. So he says, Kol makom sheyesh or, anytime there's light, there's spirituality, there's kedusha, nishar reshima, there's a residue and a trace, mimenu ki yadua. That's a law that the Arizal says in numerous places. Aderech yitzias tzaddik oser roshem. Like we see that when a tzaddik leaves, he leaves a roshem. Shenikr shechaser. It's clear that he's gone. Masha'ein kain ilu lo hayat tzaddik klal. There would be no roshem if there was never a tzaddik. There would be no sign of negativity. There would be no sense of lacking, of missing, if the tzaddik was never there. L'chein bazeh inyan ha'or, hu hasagas ha'elokos. Or over here, Reb Tzadok says, means the grasping and the understanding kaviyachol of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'kvar nishar roshem ha'hasaga al yedei zeh shenikir shebekelim elu chaser mehem or elokos v'hasagas elokos. So how are we to view the world and grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. How do we understand Hashem? How do we believe in Hashem? So Reb Tzadok says is Gewalt. He says, by virtue of the fact that we recognize that Hashem is not here, that we see a chaserus, we see an emptiness, we see a lack of presence, so we could understand that there was something previously here, that there's something murmuring underneath Bria, because again, the Bria itself is the trace that's murmuring underneath HaKadosh Baruch Hu being completely revealed. So too, Bria itself has something murmuring underneath it, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu being completely revealed. So Reb Tzadok says, by virtue of the fact that we don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'gilui Mamish, means that murmuring deeply underneath it, again, that subterranean murmuring, is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was here and that He's always here. V'nimsa hasagas elokus hu b'kelim hanishbarim elu mitzad hachisaron she'anu ro'u m'makirim shechaser mehem. So the way to bring godliness and to recognize godliness in this world of Shviras HaKelim, in this world of shatterness, is to recognize that God seems to be lacking from it, which means that if something's lacking, it means it must have been here originally. And by virtue of the fact that Or Ein Sof was here originally, that means there must be a Roshem somewhere. And then we bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu here. So it's understanding by virtue of the lack, by virtue of the fact that I don't see Hashem, that the tzaddik is not here, and that Roshem, that trace, is bubbling underneath me, and I feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but I can't see it. So by virtue of the fact that it was here, now it's gone, and now I feel that it's gone, now I can understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here. And he goes on to say, Reb Tzadok says, V'zeu sod hanitzotzin, and these are the sparks of holiness, shebehem ve'etzlam begalus, that are in the Shviras HaKelim, that are in this existence that we have, that are in this world, and that are in exile. V'chol ha'avoda laha'aloisam l'mala. And like you said, based on Ishbitz, which is where this is coming from, our avoda is to be mala that Roshem, to reunite the trace with its original thing, with the thing that was there originally. Perish, shekoach osam kelim, the strength of this world, hu koach hatzimtzum v'ahelem legamre me'or Hashem yisparach. What gives strength to this world in existence is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely hides Himself. Rak shemitzumtzum b'soichem gam kein roshem zeh. But in the kelim themselves is also the residue of the fact that Hashem had to be mitzamtzim Himself. Shenikar shene'elam me'or or Hashem yisparach. This is amazing. That it's clear that God's light is lacking from them.
It's a great line, yeah.
V'hakarazu hi roshem ma'amisas or Hashem yisparach. And this recognition that the Or of Hashem is lacking here is a Roshem of the Or of Hashem Yisparach. The fact that we feel that murmuring underneath, this trace, is the fact that it was here. Because now that we recognize that the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has left them, now we understand that there is a light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the trace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. So he's speaking to us. Right now, Reb Tzadok is speaking to us.
Murmur.
He says the feeling, so what's the feeling of that Hakara? The feeling of the Hakara is when we look at the world and we say, what the heck?
Yeah.
We say, where is Hashem?
Where is He?
That in and of itself is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That in and of itself is grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ad sheyizke lavo yidei zel lidei giloi v'hiskas l'sori yisparach Kol chad lefum dargadilei acher ha'helem ha'atzim. Until all you did that murmuring, until that questioning, until that mar means bitterness, until that anxiety that's imposed upon us by seeing a world without a bora, without a Baal Habira, without like Avram Avinu saw. He said, and Reb Tzadok says the same thing. When the Medrash says that Avram Avinu asked, could it be that there's a world without a bora? He really felt there's a world without a Bora here. There's a mansion without a creator. And Reb Tzadok says in Tzidkas Tzaddik, based on the Meshilach, he says, by virtue, and Hashem answered him, he says, you're questioning. Nobody else is questioning. By virtue of your questioning, recognizing that something's lacking here, know that I'm here. Hashem didn't say, no, I'm here. He said, by virtue of the fact that you're even questioning that I'm not here, recognize that I'm here. It's the same exact thing. That bitterness that's awakened within us when we see a world that's devoid of Kedusha. And everybody will understand this on their own level. Shemasim leiv al zel lehisbonin ki lo lekach nevra. The world was not created for this emptiness and this voidness and this stam murmuring and a trace. Rakol paul maneo lekiluso. Even the negation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol in the Hester was created in order to bring praise to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Uba min ha'elam legila. And then we could come from the hiddenness into the revelation. Ayedei zehu ha'alas hanitzotzin mishrios hakelim. That's what ha'alas hanitzotzis is. Recognizing, by virtue of the fact that it's empty here, that Hashem is here, and that this trace of godliness implies, the trace of godliness means that what's present right now is reality, what's present right now is lack of God. And underneath it, what defines the reality of being separate from God is the fact that there is God underneath it. Just like we said that this bottle is only this because it's not that, so too Bria is only this because it's not Or Ein Sof. When we recognize that it's not Or Ein Sof, we can recognize that there is Or Ein Sof.
This is the concept of iskashos to tzaddikim, that the Reshimu, whatever they carry of kutshabichum, of however they're connected and however they're able to bring down to the world the Or Ein Sof, kind of they when they exist in wherever they are, that's the avodah being kashrut, because it's reality of recognizing the Or Ein Sof that was brought down from kutshabichum. That was what it is, what it's not, whatever we. Is that the iskashos? In terms of connecting, I don't know. I know rest of the chassidim. We connect by, we kashrus to the tzaddik, we kashrus to Menachem because is this because the Or Ein Sof that he brought down? It's or whatever.
I could only answer personally, but that's why I'm not a chassid, because I'm chakulim tzaddikim. I can't be makash. I mean, each of us have this. It's not only by a tzaddik. It's possible that the concept of tzaddik is that they're connecting to the Rosh Hashanah. That could be why they eat his leftovers, the whole thing about pirurin of leftovers. But I don't know. I don't know the concept of tzaddik. I don't know. We're a generation, we're Dor Yasim, we're orphans, but we don't have tzaddikim that we're makosher to, but at the same time, we say in Elul, Avi v'imi yazavuni, v'Hashem yaspeini. When our parents leave, when the tzaddikim are not there, we could connect to Hashem directly. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Alright,
so this is
everything. It's okay.
this next Reb Tzadok, I'm mamish. You read in Svarim that people, yeah.
Is what he's saying
crazy? Yeah.
Do we ever move to the level of I don't want to use the word simcha so much. But Yishuv and Simcha and that, or is it to remain in a totally state of?
That's a whole other chabura, but Simcha is not what Simcha is.
I don't want to use it both because it's going to come off as
right.
What we don't know it as, and also because
Rav Kook says in Einayah.
When are we going to be happy?
Rav Kook says.
Even if you make an akara, so now that you've moved, let's say you moved beyond that, you've now lost the akara in a way.
So, not to go into so much of an agavness. The best Torah I've seen personally on Simcha is Rav Kook and Einayah and Shabbos Chelek Aleph, where he talks about Hillel and Ezehu Sameach Hasameach, Ezehu Ashir Hasameach B'chalko. What does it mean Hasameach B'chalko? So Rav Kook says Sameach B'chalko means Simcha Chelkis. It means happiness in the part of something. A part. Meaning the world is broken. And that's not pessimistic and it's not existential. That's if you open any Chassidic Sefer, and especially if you open Eitz Chaim. The world starts off with Tzimtzum, and Eitz Chaim ends with Klipos. Eitz Chaim ends with describing how the Klipos work, how they're Sitra Achra. So the Arizal died, unfortunately, in Zochet, and he writes in Pri Eitz Chaim that we were in Zochet to bring him as Mashiach ben Yosef. Therefore he couldn't give over all of his Torah. But the Chora, the rest of the Arizal's Torah is connected to the Bias HaMashiach. Those dargos of shleimus, which is what Simcha really is Mashiach. Right now what we have is Simcha Chalkis. We could be happy with humble expectations and grasping parts of things and attempting to experience moments of... There's nothing greater than this intensity of Avodas Hashem, of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if it means connecting to Him, it's like the Piazetzner says by telling people to scream out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Kaviyachal to be cursing at HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Yeah.
You're still speaking. You're still speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're still... So there's a shleimus in that it's a hiskabros hakoach, and it's a revelation of the eye. It's a revelation of the essential aspect of the person by connecting to Liban Yisrael, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But other than that, I can't say that I found any... it's not going to be in Happiness by Tal Ben Shachar. I don't think that's a shot, Even though he says good. He also says Simcha's in the process. All that means is that there's a process and we're not going to reach an end to find happiness in the...
Is the eighth of it, of how to reach that sof?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like different people have different paths towards it, but it seems as if some people have it in the bechina of protest, and some people have it in the bechina of passivity.
Yeah. That's totally right. I hear passivity more, but
Right, but it seems like Avraham Avinu was more bechinas protest.
Yeah.
It seems like
Moshe Shapiro, I heard a shir from Moshe Shapiro where he called him a terrorist.
a terrorist.
Yeah.
Who is it?
A terrorist.
Moshe Shapiro Shlita said that Avraham Avinu was a terrorist. Literally, he went against everyone. He shattered. Terrorism is that it shatters the day-to-day calmness and the status quo of things, and it reveals that it tears reality asunder. And
Survivors had a level of protest.
My Saba, I had Saba.
They've seen enough.
I can't say.
No.
I'm saying there's survivors who would sit on Yom Kippur beferish and eat pig.
Yeah, they would
But
say.
Ralph, you know that story
They would
say
say,
such a
they
thing,
would
but
say
it's
the last day when they were liberated was the hardest day because it wasn't that Mashiach was taking them out; it was that Russians and Americans were taking them out.
It's like Rav Heschel said that their feet, when he walked with Martin Luther King, this is what I always come back to, that their feet were davening with
Right.
God. So when you're sitting outside a coffee shop,
And
wherever
learning
the heck you
Quran.
are, and you're not doing anything, that's our service. That's just collecting my broken bones and But now it's not sad. I mean, it's not sad.
It's just not the happiness that we have.
It's
in our mind.
shleimus. It's a way to be. It's a way to. Rav Weinberg always says that happiness is in humble expectations, and it's just anivus and simcha are very makusher. It's
But protest isn't humble expectation. Protest is greater expectation.
But I would say that protest is generally a response to a call. That's Avram Avinu was called.
Right, but
What do you mean?
who's responding?
Well, in reality, protest, like a real protest that will have like kiyum, is usually bringing back something that's extreme to a level that's less than it. Stuff that's beyond that takes something that's not, that's, let's say at this level and tries to push it beyond, that usually ends up as something not good. For example, in Russia with the revolution, they were protesting something to more extreme, and what did it lead to? Something like communism. Versus if you're protesting, let's say, this in Israel pre-state, they're protesting to, in a way, bring it more to just the expectation of homeland for our people.
Yeah, for sure.
So when that happens, it has more of a kiyum than something that's, the expectations of beyond that, something more extreme. But the humble expectation doesn't mean that I'm in what I'm doing. It means that I think that I'm bringing the level down to something lower than where it is.
Macklemore said that. Yeah. Expectations turn into resentments. If you're expecting Mashiach to greet you at the gates of Dachau, then, and it's a Russian dude who's been eating chocolate and sausage a lot, you're going to resent the fact that the Ramchal isn't taking you out, and it's just a Russian guy who eats sausage.
Karen Horney says in her book, The Human Growth of Neuroses, She says she calls something the tyranny of the should.
Should.
Should is things that should be expectations.
Like English,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Expectations and things we
yeah.
expect to happen, and that's the root of neuroses, according to her.
Yeah.
Tiredness? You said?
Tyranny,
Isn't it
tyranny
the
of
power
the
hour
should.
that like Damsker, like Yitzchak refuses to accept that Avram Avinu died. So like he refuses it, and he argues with Hashem, saying like you bring him back,
Right.
and that's like the makor of Tchias HaMesim.
Yeah.
That it will happen
Yeah.
because like he refused to accept that.
We do the same thing with Yaakov, Lov Mace.
Right.
Yeah.
It's Hanukkah.
Yeah.
You're the first piece in Bnei Yisrael.
That's good. That's
Pasuk of Kislev is. This is Kislev. This is
That's
dreams.
revelation then. So the question that I was trying to raise was whether it's passive or protest.
The protest that works is Gandhi.
It seems as if the figures of Am Yisrael
Mhm.
create progress by protest, not by. I don't know if Emunah is the right thing to say, but
You're saying Avram Avinu yells at Hashem like, "Don't destroy them."
yeah, what are you
So
doing?
Rav Simcha Bunim,
You know,
Rav
yeah,
Simcha
so,
Bunim,
yeah.
the two letters. I mean, this is a tzad echad of the Avodah of a Jew.
Okay.
This is the
I
show.
would say that even
Mm.
that's humble expectations. Avram is like, this is what should
Right.
happen. This is not
That's
crazy.
very good also.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What do you
That's what I was trying to.
That's
explain.
cool.
It's not
That's
radical.
cool.
Like,
Avram
this is-
Avinu is not
Yeah, it's
radical.
like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This
Why
is
they are
humble.
Rishayim?
What?
They are Rishayim.
You're talking Sodom.
I'm saying Sodom.
I'm saying
Yeah.
when
He's talking bringing God.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Sodom is
things should happen in a
is-
certain way. Yes, he's a terrorist in terms of that because he's.
Why Hashem is right in a sense.
It could
They're
be
Rishayim,
that the
they're
terrorist
evil.
is the
And he
rationalist.
says no.
It's good.
It's very good. It's as if there's a level. I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's as if there's a level of the survivor saying "no," and then saying because not, I'm justified by moving to Tel Aviv and doing whatever. I'd like to be a mom who's a secular Israeli doesn't keep mitzvahs. Yes, or
Eliyahu tiach dvarim klapei ma'ala. The Gemara says Eliyahu threw things back to God, and he said, "You did this. What are you blaming them? You did this."
is there a greater level of emunah in protest or in pashtus? That's the question I'm having. Maybe.
I would say Gandhi.
Gandhi.
Passive,
Gandhi.
Is
passive
it-
protest.
No,
Is it the same thing?
tried
Right,
to
it's the
kill
same thing,
himself.
isn't it?
Passive. Yeah, Gandhi. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I have a whole book in my bathroom if you'd like to sit in the toilet.
Let's go back to
Anyway,
Tzadok.
yeah.
Let's go back to Tzadok. This Reb Tzadok. This Reb Tzadok. So now let's bring it down to Klal Yisrael.
Okay.
This is the world. Let's bring it down to Klal Yisrael. The Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses Olam Haba and Elu she'en lahem chelek Olam Haba. This is very cool. He says that every Jew, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek Olam Haba, except these people, except these specific individuals. So the Gemara goes on to say, but Bo'u Dorshe Reshumos, and they said, no, they also have Olam Haba. So again, Chazal tell us these people don't have Olam Haba. These Dorshe Reshumos, these anonymous people who are Doresh, who learn the residue of things, they're the ones who said, no, they also have Olam Haba. So who are these Dorshe Reshumos? Dr. Tzadok. Hainu sheyachlu lahasig ma she'ein bo haskadlis gamor rak reshimama. The Dorshe Reshumos were those individuals who were able to grasp that which wasn't revealed completely, but rather it was the trace of something. Kima sheshaninu she'ein lehem chelik le'olam haba. So we learned that there are certain Jews who are able to lose their chelik and olam haba mitzad ha'hasaga ha'niglish shahayta l'chachmei Yisrael b'nei olam haba. That was only according to the revealed reality, the present reality, the presence of what was going on, of what they thought olam haba was. Allah be'emes atzmus olam haba ayin l'arasa. But olam haba itself they could never grasp. They couldn't understand it, essentially. Ve'eno ela hasaga derech chachma. And all they grasped was the derech of chachma. Yesh ba ma'amakim she'enu musag l'chol chachma Yisrael ba'olam hazeh klal. But there's certain aspects of olam haba, which is where even the sinners who Chazal tell us don't have a cheluk in olam haba, where they have a cheluk in olam haba also. The al zeh ne'emar ayin le'ra'asa elokim zulasecha. Umei oisan ma'amakim, and from these depths which aren't revealed, yesh gam kein reshimas k'tzatz. There's a reshimu of a reshimu, there's a trace of a trace, a residue of a residue. Shemetgalos l'dor shehem asher yidrushum be'emes. That is revealed to those people who know how to search for it, and those people who know how to learn it. Sheyachlu lahasig shemetz davar. an aspect of something, a crumb of something. Kemasig Reshimu megof hadavar, as if they were grasping the essential thing itself. Like Reb Tzadok said previously in the original piece, that by grasping the residue, the Reshimu of not being here, we could grasp that Hashem is here. And by virtue of the fact that they were able to be masig this Roshem, we're able to say that they also have a chelik in Olam Haba. Because Bnei Yisrael, that shores that's makosher to Olam Haba, can never be lost. And all negative actions and all messing up and all garbage is only mitzad Olam Hazeh.
Whoa.
Yeah. So go to where I underlined after. V'dor she'reshumos masigim roshem kedusha sheyesh afilu b'hayoter garua shav Yisrael. And these dor she'reshumos who perceive the same person, they see the same sinner, they see the same shlub, they see the same bum who's a sinner mamish, and who Chazal tell us has no olam haba, they see him and they say, yeah, but what's murmuring underneath him? What's trying to express itself? What's defining him by aspect of negation? And that's the fact that he has a nitzitz elokus in him. And therefore they're also able to say, these Dorshei Shumas are able to say that they also have a chelik in Olam Haba. These two also, because they're masig that Reshimu. And this will be very much bekitzer, but this is what a chalom is. This is what dreams are. Cheshvan is the month of dreaming. HaMelech Os Nun HaMelech Os Samech B'Shena. The month that's connected to the Os Samech, which is Somech Hashem L'Chol Noflim, which is the elevation of all the fallen ones. Nun is Cheshvan, the fallen month of silence. In a dream we elevate all the residue. The murmuring of our lips in a dream become present and they become aspects of our reality. The month of Kislev is when the nights get longer and it's a month of sleep, and this is why Yaakov dreams here. And after Vayetze Yaakov from Beersheba, we find him dreaming. So Zak the Arizal, what's a dream? And this is an arichas that he has in other places. Kfar Yadata, Inyan HaChalom. What's a dream? Shehu Bizman HaKatnos. It's when at night a person's mochin leave him, a person's mind, a person's consciousness, a person's ability to be on the point leaves him and it elevates up to Shemayim, like we say, Biado Afkid Ruchi, right? The Ha'ara Rishona de Reshimu de Gadlus Hanisha B'Secha Katnis Hahu Nikra Chalom. So what enables us to dream when we're sleeping? It's the Ha'ara, it's the light of the Reshimu, the residue of the Mochin of Gadlus, the residue of our waking consciousness, the residue of what we thought about in the day imprints itself upon our mind. And that's what a dream is. The dream is the trace of our waking consciousness. And the dream is what we see murmuring beneath, in the nocturnal aspect of our lives, what murmurs beneath our consciousness, what murmurs beneath that which we experience on a day-to-day level. Everything we do has a murmuring, has a trembling of something trying to express itself. And that's what a dream is. A dream is that inspiration, that ability to think freely, unlimited by the constraints of reality and by intellectual processes, but rather to actually dream, to express oneself. And the Arizal is saying beferish, without going into the details, that is the trace. This trace will eventually express itself and become godless. It will become a chalom. Until last level it's revealed that even reality, which is also a roshem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zorin Sof, is hayinu kacholmem. The Balatanya and the Mitler Rebbe, they don't say that in the negative. They don't say this world is so bad that it will eventually be revealed to be a dream. But rather, what do they say? And this is awesome. They say that in a dream, there's shnei hafachim mishamshem be'echad. A dream can have an opposition that's united, and it could be the coincidence of opposites. Last level, it will be revealed that even this world was a dream, where on the one hand we're so low, but on the one hand we're so high. On the one hand we could have Ein Lahem Chilek L'Olam Haba, but on the other hand they could have Olam Haba according to the Dorshei Rishimos. The dream itself is what reality is. And that's the trace, that's the residue of waking reality. And that's what Cheshvan is all about. Because Cheshvan is Shem and Zayas. The Bnei Yisrael says Shem and Zayas leaves the Roshem. The Roshem, that's why Shem and Zayas is used. Because Chanukah, the light within the darkness, the Olam Haba within the non-Olam Haba, the Orient Sof within the Tzimtzum, that's what Chanukah is about. That's what Kedusha is about. And that's what Purim's also, that's Purim also. And I didn't put it on the sheet, but that's Adil Yada. That's where we're removing the Mochin and revealing the Roshem of it, but that's also, the Sodi Sharm says very beautifully in Os Vav in Purim. He says, Purim is Melasham Pirurim. Have you seen this Torah? It's Melasham Pirurim. It's the leftovers. Crumbs. What are crumbs? Crumbs are a trace of what was originally there. On Purim, we're awakening those crumbs, and we're saying, rebuild us from these crumbs. Bnei Yisrael were at a very low point, and it was Nidme L'Layla. It was Nidme L'Chalom. It was a place where there was only tzimtzum. And the murmuring, the trace of Bnei Yisrael, that aspect, that which was not there, is revealed on Purim, and that's the Chabura. But, just to end, a lot of this is influenced by, just to bring Derrida back into it, because he was a Jew, Derrida has this concept of the trace all the time. So I'll just read this out loud. It says, writing makes the movement of signification possible only if each element that is said to be present, meaning the written word itself, appearing on the stage of presence, is related to something other than itself, meaning that which is not there right now, but retains the mark of a past element, that trace, that thing that hasn't been revealed yet, and already lets itself be hollowed out by the mark of its relation to a future element. Meaning the thing in the present is defined by that which will eventually be but is not here yet, and that which was but is not here anymore, because those are the things that define the ability for something to be present. This trace, this residue, this Reshimu relates no less to what is called the future than to what is called the past, because it's everything that has not been yet. It's like we said by HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol, that the trace of the eventual Bria is what screamed out to the Or Ein Sof. And it constitutes what is called the present by this very relation to what it is not, to what it is absolutely is not. Meaning the way we define things is by what is not here at this point. The Reshimu itself screams out from what is. And to end with Levinas, another Jew who deserves to join the Chabura, in his essay, The Trace of the Face, he says, the trace is a presence, meaning this Reshimu is something that's there, of that which, properly speaking, has never been there. It's not something present, it's something that is not actively participating in our day-to-day existence. It's everything that is not there. It's the fact that there are people not here. It's the fact that people did not show up here, that they're here. Meaning it's absent, but by virtue of its being absent, it's present. By me recognizing that it's lacking, it's here. That's what Levinas
Does
is
it need the
saying.
recognition of that to be present? No.
For it to be cognitively and consciously present, but it's here. It's everything is everything, and that's the Rashash, and the Rashash has Klaus and his Kashas. That's what it is. Everything is every other thing, except that it's representing itself right now as this thing.
Does it require the Gilui?
No, it's entrenched within the DNA. That's why we could say, Harini Muchad Muzum L'Chaim Mitzvah Sasei Shal Tzitzis V'Kol HaTaryag Mitzvah Shetuliyim B'Hem. Tzitzis is made up of every other mitzvah that is not here.
Why not put on tzitzis without saying that?
Because you're Mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis.
No, I'm saying.
So what's the recognition of it?
Is saying that like a Harini,
like a simon or a siba? Is it like?
Yeah, is it saying it's bringing it to conscious, or it's saying despite the unconscious level of it, being Mekayim b'shem kol Yisrael, b'shem kol pratim shalem, whatever.
I don't know if I fully understand.
Meaning, the fact that we're saying it sounds like we're bringing it to consciousness. That there are many other kavanos that we don't have that are being Mekayim because we're saying this.
But that doesn't mean it wasn't in reality. Consciousness is another shlav in recognizing reality. Consciousness is not bringing things into fruition, it's recognizing what's there. When I wake up in the morning was there. Okay. Except, the darga is really vuhum or sashachar. That's what first halacha is, that David HaMelech used to get up at Chatzos in order to preempt the morning. Right. But what we do by waking up in the morning is we're already entering into an active day. By becoming conscious of the day, we're joining it. But everything is made up of everything else. That's Arevim Kol Yisrael Zelazeh. That's how the Pri-Haaretz says that one Jew who goes into Galus is as if all of Klal Yisrael goes into Galus, because every Jew is every other Jew. And I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the aspect of Rafi within me is talking to the aspect of Joey within Rafi. And that's not New Age holographic reality, that's the Rashash, Beferish.
That's one of the greatest 3 sentences I've ever heard.
Can you say it one more time?
Say everything you...
No, just exactly said your own.
The Rashash.
The Rashash.
Yeah, the Rashash. Say the Rashash.
Right on what the Am Yisrael needs.
I forgot.
The you
watch it on YouTube. Watch it on YouTube tomorrow.
I'm saying that every person, that me speaking to Rafi right now is not me speaking to another person. It's me speaking, the part of Rafi in me is speaking to the me and Rafi.
Joey and Rafi. That's
the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal Shem Tov says, when the Baal Shem Tov says that what we see in other people what the Baal Shem Tov says, that what we see in other people is a mirror of ourselves. That's not stam, like, oh, it's a miracle that he knows what I did. It's Ella that, what I see in Isaac right now is the Isaac of me. That's it. That's all relationship. What enables me to connect to any other human being?
Yeah.
That's
The Isaac of yours, the you of Isaac.
It's both. It's called the chiluf. That's what the Rashash and the Arizal speaks about. It's called the chiluf, that the part of me becomes the part of you. And this is the sort of the Gemara, and the Baal Tanya even says this, that a man and a woman who have relations, right? If the man goes first, then a girl will be born. But if the girl goes first, then the man will be born. So that's lahepach. Ella, that there's an aspect of the man in the woman, and there's an aspect of the woman in the man. And in the relationship, the aspect of the woman from the man goes to the woman, and the aspect of the man from the woman goes to the man. So at the end, there's going to be a man sheba man and a woman sheba woman.
Wow.
But when a man goes first, that means that the aspect of the woman within the man went first, so therefore a nekeva will be born. But when the woman goes first, that means the aspect of the man within the woman will go first, and therefore a man will be born. Baal Tanya says cool. This is everything. This is the Leshem Kabbalah. It's the Madama and the Bendama and it's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. I mean, the Baal Tanya says that the idea of that, like, Kol Yisrael is not like it's not a concept of reality.
Yeah.
It just is. That's just what it is.
Who
It's
says
not
That's
like
reality. The Baal Tanya.
Tanya.
But that Baal Shem Tov Torah is very important. It's that it's not stam that.
You overlook it sometimes. You think like,
Yeah.
nah, it's just him. It really is just him.
No, it's not just him. It's that the only way to connect to someone else, we're all individual worlds. The only way for me to connect to someone is to find that point of me within him and the point of him within me. And that's all of creation, everything.
So is it respecting to yourself then?
Well, nothing and no one is separate.
Yeah, we're not, there is no
Okay, now I got it.
But it's why chesed, what makes
No,
chesed, the
Hashem
Arizal
Echad.
asks it.
Yeah.
What makes
Okay.
chesed chesed and what makes chesed and gevura gevura? Ella, that chesed is just a collection of all the parts of chesed from every other sphera, and gevura is just a collection of all the parts of gevura from every other sphera.
But
And
within everything,
there's a
within
point
that
of, yeah,
itself,
there is,
also
there's an aspect of Rafi Shabarafi, but there's also an aspect of everyone else
I
Shabarafi.
understand though, because the whole time we're talking that
It's very good.
the aspect of Rafi, which is within
Arizal,
Joey,
It's nice to hear my name.
is negative.
Just kidding.
Oh, this is a,
A
yeah.
lot of cameras.
No, but this is a separate,
So he exists in you only in the fact that you are not him.
that is not present. But if I but again, the whole shir is about recognizing the dormant aspect.
In a commandment thing, but even I think what Rafi Shbarafi was saying at the end, that what's the point of bringing it to cognition? That bringing it to cognition doesn't mean that it's no longer negative. It's just that it has brought it in a different shlav of mitzias behind it.
Halavai to bring this.
It might just enlighten whatever Joey or Rebuttal is here. Meaning, yes, it's already existing like on a subconscious Helen level, but our yichud as a chevra amongst Torah and the people outside of this room is a reality. It's just a question of whether we create the reality within the room as well.
I heard Rav Weinberger say once at Arizal showed us, and this will end, that he said that and I don't remember when it was, and I don't remember anyone else who was there, but they were singing Yedid Nefesh, and he stopped by Higalena, and he said, "This is what we're about. This is what Chassidus is about. This is what the Baal Shem Tov was about. Higalena, reveal it now, not create it, but reveal it. Everything is set, ready to go. Our avoda is to recognize and bring it into fruition. We're not building anything. We're not fixing."